The golden light of late afternoon bathed the small neighborhood park, casting long shadows across the fallen leaves. The air was crisp but not cold, just the kind of day 8-year-old Amelia Dawson loved. She hopped along the path, her brown boots crunching on dry leaves as she made her way toward the swings. Her parents, Rachel and Tom Dawson, sat on a nearby bench, chatting about their day. They had brought Amelia to the park to unwind, but their conversation had drawn them into the usual routine: work stress, family schedules, and everything in between. Amelia didn't mind. She liked playing alone sometimes. It gave her space to dream. Today, however, felt strange. As she kicked at a small pile of leaves, Amelia sensed something, like a tingling at the back of her neck. She glanced around the park. A few other families were scattered along the path. Kids on swings, parents scrolling through their phones. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing: a man. He stood across the park near the entrance, leaning against a tree, his hands stuffed into the pockets of a long, gray coat. He wasn't doing anything, just watching. But he wasn't watching the other kids or the families. He was watching her. Amelia's heart began to race. She turned away, pretending not to notice him, but the uneasy feeling stayed. Something about the man's stare made her skin crawl. She had seen strangers before, lots of them, in parks and stores, but this was different. This wasn't just a glance. It was deliberate. Amelia's parents had told her many times about the importance of listening to her instincts. If something feels wrong, her mother always said, "You come find us right away." But Rachel and Tom were still deep in conversation, and Amelia didn't want to interrupt them again. Instead, she decided to move. She left the swings and walked toward the far end of the park, where the old stone fountain stood, its water trickling quietly. She figured if she stayed away from the main path, maybe the man would lose interest. But he didn't. Out of the corner of her eye, Amelia saw him step away from the tree. He wasn't walking toward anyone else. He was following her. A wave of cold fear washed over her. What do I do? She thought, her small hands trembling. Then she spotted her. An elderly woman sitting alone on a nearby bench, a book in her lap. She wore a thick, knitted sweater and a scarf loosely draped over her shoulders. Her silver hair glimmered in the sunlight. Amelia didn't know the woman, but something about her seemed safe, like a grandmother who would bake cookies and tell bedtime stories. Desperation gave Amelia the courage she needed. She took a deep breath and hurried toward the woman, her boots thudding softly on the pavement. "Hi, Aunt Hilda," Amelia called as she reached the bench, her voice a little too loud, a little too shaky. She stood in front of the elderly woman, her eyes wide with fear. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The woman blinked, startled. But then, something remarkable happened. Without missing a beat, the woman gave Amelia a warm, knowing smile. "There you are, sweetheart," the woman said, closing her book and tucking it into her bag. "I was wondering when you'd find me." She extended her hand, and Amelia took it gratefully. The woman's hand was cool but steady, and the comfort of her touch calmed Amelia's racing heart. The man in the gray coat stopped in his tracks, standing a few yards away. His eyes flicked from Amelia to the elderly woman, his expression shifting from curiosity to suspicion. "Let's sit for a moment, darling." The woman, Miss Hilda Sanders, said softly, squeezing Amelia's hand. "You look a little tired." She pulled Amelia close, her arm draped protectively around the child, while keeping her gaze calm and casual. Miss Hilda reached into her bag with her free hand and pulled out her phone. She swiped the screen without drawing too much attention, quietly dialing 911. "Hi, it's me," Miss Hilda said into the phone, her voice light and conversational. "I'm at the park with Amelia, just waiting on her parents. Could you come by?" It was subtle, no mention of the danger, no panic in her voice, but the message was clear to the 911 operator on the other end. "Yes, everything's fine," Ms. Hilda continued, her eyes never leaving the man in the gray coat. He was still there, watching them, his jaw clenched. "Thank you. See you soon." Miss Hilda ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. She smiled down at Amelia, her expression as gentle as a lullaby. "You're safe," she whispered. "Just stay with me." For what felt like hours but was only a few minutes, Amelia sat beside Miss Hilda, her small body pressed close to the woman's. Every now and then, she glanced toward the man, hoping he would leave. But he didn't. He stood near the fountain, shifting his weight from foot to foot, as if debating whether to approach. Then, from across the park, came the distant sound of sirens. The man's head snapped up. His eyes darted around the park, scanning the path for an escape route. Miss Hilda's grip on Amelia's hand tightened slightly. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "Just a little longer." As the police cars pulled up near the entrance, 2 officers stepped out, their eyes locked on the man. One of them, a tall woman with a badge that gleamed in the sunlight, approached with purposeful strides. The man in the gray coat cursed under his breath and bolted toward the far end of the park. The officers were quick to react, sprinting after him. Amelia watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as the officers gave chase through the trees and across the playground. After a tense few moments, they tackled the man to the ground. Handcuffs clicked into place, and the officers led him toward the waiting squad car. Miss Hilda let out a quiet sigh of relief. She gave Amelia's hand a reassuring squeeze before leaning down to meet her eyes. "You did the right thing, sweetheart," Miss Hilda said gently. "You're very brave." Amelia smiled, a small, tentative smile, but it was the first real smile she'd managed since the encounter began. Later that evening, Amelia sat curled up on the living room couch, wrapped in her favorite blue blanket. The soft hum of the TV filled the room, but she wasn't paying attention. Her parents, Rachel and Tom, hovered nearby, still shaken by what had happened earlier in the park. Tom stood near the window, rubbing the back of his neck, while Rachel paced back and forth across the room. Both of them wore the same expression, one of guilt and helplessness. "I still can't believe it," Rachel muttered, her voice strained. "How could we not notice him? How could we not see the signs?" Tom exhaled slowly. "We were distracted," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We should have been paying closer attention." They both turned to Amelia, who sat quietly on the couch, her little hands clutched together. Rachel knelt beside her and brushed a stray curl from her daughter's face. "Honey," Rachel whispered, "why didn't you come to us? Why didn't you tell us right away?" Amelia's gaze dropped to her lap. "I tried," she murmured. "But you didn't hear me." The words stung more than Rachel or Tom could admit. They exchanged a glance, silently acknowledging the truth in Amelia's words. It wasn't the first time they had brushed off her concerns, assuming they were just the worries of an overactive imagination. Tom crouched beside Rachel. "We're so sorry, sweetheart," he said softly. "We're going to do better. We'll listen from now on, okay?" Amelia gave a small nod, but her eyes still held a flicker of uncertainty. It was going to take more than words to rebuild her trust. The next day, Rachel and Tom decided to take Amelia to the police station for a follow-up conversation with Detective Carla Myers, who had been kind and reassuring throughout the entire ordeal. They also wanted to see Ms. Hilda Sanders again, the woman whose quick thinking had likely saved Amelia's life. When they arrived, Detective Myers greeted them with a warm smile. "It's good to see you all," she said, kneeling to Amelia's height. "You doing okay, kiddo?" Amelia nodded shyly. "We've got the guy," Myers continued. "Isaac Fletcher is his name, and thanks to you and Ms. Hilda, he won't be bothering anyone else." Rachel wrapped an arm around Amelia's shoulders. "Thank you," she said to Myers, her voice filled with gratitude. "We don't know how to thank Miss Hilda enough for what she did." As if on cue, the door opened, and Miss Hilda entered the room. She wore the same warm smile as the day before, though today she seemed less like a stranger and more like an old friend. "There's my little hero," Miss Hilda said, walking over to Amelia and giving her a wink. "How are you holding up, darling?" Amelia smiled, a little brighter this time. "I'm okay." Rachel and Tom stood to greet Miss Hilda, shaking her hand with grateful expressions. "We can't thank you enough," Rachel said earnestly. "What you did. We don't even want to think about what could have happened without you." Miss Hilda waved off the thanks with a modest chuckle. "It was nothing, really. Just an old habit of keeping an eye on things. I'm glad I was there when she needed me." Tom gave her a grateful smile. "If there's anything we can do to repay you, anything at all." Miss Hilda shook her head. "No need for that. I think helping your daughter was exactly what I needed." Over the next few weeks, Amelia and Miss Hilda's paths crossed again at the park, at the community center, and even at the little bakery on the corner. Each time they met, their bond grew stronger. Miss Hilda, a retired schoolteacher, had spent many of her later years feeling isolated and out of place. Her husband had passed away years earlier, and her grown children lived in other cities, rarely visiting. She had quietly withdrawn from the community, believing that her time to make a difference had passed. But spending time with Amelia gave Miss Hilda a new sense of purpose. They would sit on the bench together, sharing stories and feeding birds. Miss Hilda even brought along small books to read to Amelia, much to the young girl's delight. "You know," Miss Hilda said one day as they sat by the fountain, "you remind me of a student I once had. She was just as curious and brave as you." Amelia smiled shyly. "What happened to her?" Miss Hilda chuckled. "She grew up and became a doctor. I guess all those stories we read together paid off." Amelia giggled, feeling safe and understood in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. At home, Rachel and Tom made a concerted effort to change. They spent more time with Amelia, listening to her stories, playing games with her, and making sure she knew how much they valued her thoughts and feelings. One evening, as they sat together at the dinner table, Amelia shared a story she had written in school about a brave little bird that escaped a trap. Rachel listened intently, nodding at all the right moments. "That's a wonderful story, sweetheart," Rachel said, genuinely impressed. "I love how the bird outsmarted the bad guy." Amelia beamed, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly heard. Later that night, as Rachel tucked Amelia into bed, she kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Amelia. You're the bravest little girl I know." Amelia snuggled deeper into her blankets, feeling warm and safe. "I had help," she whispered, thinking of Miss Hilda. "She's really brave too." Rachel smiled. "I think you're both very lucky to have found each other." As the house grew quiet, Amelia drifted off to sleep, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected friendship that had come from a scary encounter. A week later, Miss Hilda invited Amelia and her parents to the community center where she had recently started volunteering. The center was an old building, filled with books, colorful art supplies, and the laughter of children attending various after-school programs. Miss Hilda had found herself re-engaged with her love of teaching, organizing reading circles and storytelling sessions for neighborhood kids. When Amelia stepped through the door, her eyes lit up at the sight of shelves filled with books and art supplies neatly arranged in baskets. "Wow!" she exclaimed, spinning slowly in place. "This place is amazing. I knew you'd like it," Miss Hilda said with a grin. "Come on, let me show you around." Rachel and Tom followed, watching as their daughter held Miss Hilda's hand, skipping beside her. It was heartwarming to see Amelia so joyful, and they were grateful that she had found someone like Miss Hilda, a friend and mentor they hadn't even known she needed. Amelia joined one of the reading circles with Miss Hilda that afternoon. They sat on colorful beanbags, surrounded by a small group of children. Miss Hilda opened a book called The Brave Little Bird, a story about a small bird finding courage in the face of danger. Much like Amelia's own story, Amelia listened intently as Miss Hilda read aloud, her soothing voice bringing the story to life. As the other children giggled and whispered, Amelia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. After the reading session, one of the children, a girl named Sophie, approached Amelia. "Hey, that was fun. Do you want to color with us?" she asked, holding up a box of crayons. Amelia hesitated, glancing toward Miss Hilda, who gave her an encouraging smile. "Go on, darling. You'll have fun." Amelia nodded and followed Sophie to a table where a group of children were drawing colorful animals and fantastic creatures. It was a small moment, but it felt like a big step for Amelia, making a friend without feeling out of place or unsure of herself. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Detective Carla Myers stopped by the community center to follow up with Ms. Hilda and Amelia. She greeted them warmly, her badge catching the golden light of the fading day. "Just wanted to see how my two heroes are doing," Myers said, smiling as she approached. "We're doing well," Ms. Hilda replied with a grin. "Amelia's been making new friends and getting to know the other kids." Amelia smiled proudly, clutching a drawing she had made of a bird flying through the clouds. Myers crouched down to Amelia's height. "That's a great picture, kiddo. I'm really proud of you." Amelia beamed. Myers then turned to Ms. Hilda, her expression growing serious. "We've been looking deeper into Isaac Fletcher's background. Turns out he's been on our radar for a while. He had been targeting parks and public spaces, trying to lure children. You both saved more than just yourselves that day." Ms. Hilda's eyes darkened slightly at the thought of what could have happened. "I'm just glad we stopped him in time," she said quietly. Myers nodded. "Because of your actions. He won't be able to hurt anyone else." She handed Ms. Hilda a small card. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." "Thank you, Detective," Ms. Hilda said, tucking the card into her coat pocket. As Myers left, Amelia gave Ms. Hilda's hand a little squeeze. "We did something really good, didn't we?" Ms. Hilda smiled, her heart full. "Yes, darling, we did." In the following days, visiting the community center became part of Amelia's routine. Every afternoon, she and Ms. Hilda would meet at the park and walk there together. Ms. Hilda continued to lead reading circles, and Amelia found herself participating more and more, reading aloud, sharing stories, and even helping younger children with crafts. At home, Amelia's parents noticed the changes in her. She was more confident, more eager to share her thoughts and ideas. Rachel and Tom also made an effort to stay involved, listening to Amelia's stories and setting aside time for family activities. One evening, as they sat together playing a board game, Amelia looked up at her parents and said, "I'm really happy we go to the community center. Ms. Hilda says we're making a difference." Tom smiled. "I think Ms. Hilda is right, and we're really proud of you." "Amelia," Rachel nodded. "You're brave and kind, and we're lucky to have you." Amelia's heart swelled with happiness. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly understood not just by Ms. Hilda, but by her parents too. One afternoon, as they sat on the bench after a storytelling session, Ms. Hilda turned to Amelia with a thoughtful expression. "How would you feel about speaking at the next neighborhood meeting?" Amelia blinked in surprise. "Me? Speak in front of everyone?" Ms. Hilda nodded. "I think it would be wonderful if you shared your story. You could tell everyone about how you found the courage to ask for help when you needed it most." Amelia hesitated, biting her lip. "What if they don't like what I say?" Ms. Hilda smiled gently. "They will, darling. And even if they don't, what matters is that you tried. You've got a story worth telling." Amelia thought about it for a moment, then gave a determined nod. "Okay, I'll do it." Ms. Hilda beamed with pride. "That's my brave girl." The neighborhood meeting was set to take place on a Saturday evening at the community center. As the date approached, Amelia grew both excited and nervous. She spent her afternoons with Ms. Hilda, practicing what she wanted to say. They sat together on the same bench in the park, where their story had first begun. Ms. Hilda listened patiently as Amelia rehearsed, offering gentle suggestions and encouraging her whenever the little girl got stuck. "Just speak from the heart," Ms. Hilda reminded her. "Everyone there cares about what you have to say." But what if they don't? Amelia whispered. What if they think I'm just a kid? Miss Hilda gave her a warm smile. Being a kid doesn't make your story any less important. In fact, it makes it even more special. Not everyone has the courage you have. Amelia. Those words stayed with Amelia, giving her the confidence she needed. The night of the neighborhood meeting arrived, and the community center buzzed with energy. Neighbors filled the room, chatting and sipping tea from paper cups. The walls were decorated with colorful posters made by the children who attended the after-school programs, and the smell of cookies wafted from a table at the back. Amelia sat in the front row with her parents. Rachel gave her daughter's hand a reassuring squeeze. "You'll do great, sweetie," she whispered. Ms. Hilda stood nearby, her comforting presence steadying Amelia's nerves. Detective Carla Myers was also present. Sitting near the back of the room, she gave Amelia a little wave, reminding the girl of the important role she had played in keeping others safe. When the time came, the meeting began with the usual updates, community events, plans for a new playground, and discussions about forming a neighborhood watch group. Then the meeting organizer smiled and gestured toward Amelia. "Tonight, we have a special guest," the organizer announced. "Amelia Dawson has a story to share, a story about courage, and how small actions can make a big difference. Let's give her a warm welcome." Amelia's heart raced as she stood up and made her way to the front of the room. She glanced at Ms. Hilda, who gave her a reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, Amelia faced the crowd. "Hi," Amelia began, her small voice carrying through the quiet room. "My name is Amelia Dawson, and I want to tell you about something that happened to me." She told the story slowly, explaining how she had felt scared in the park when she noticed the man following her. She described how she found Ms. Hilda and how the kind woman had pretended to know her, keeping her safe until the police arrived. "When I saw the man, I didn't know what to do at first," Amelia admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But Ms. Hilda helped me, and the police came in time. I think it's important to listen to your instincts, even if you're just a kid." The audience listened in respectful silence, some nodding thoughtfully, and Amelia continued, glancing toward her parents. "I also learned that it's really important to have people who listen to you, whether it's your family, a friend, or even someone you just met. I'm really glad Ms. Hilda listened to me that day." Ms. Hilda beamed with pride, her heart swelling at Amelia's words. Amelia finished with a small, shy smile. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, sometimes, asking for help is the bravest thing you can do." The audience erupted into applause, and Amelia's cheeks flushed with pride. She looked over at Ms. Hilda, who gave her a wink. "You did it, darling," she mouthed. After Amelia's speech, several people in the audience stood up to applaud, including Detective Myers and her parents. Ms. Hilda stood as well, clapping with quiet pride. It wasn't just applause for the little girl's bravery. It was an acknowledgement of the lessons Amelia's story had taught them all. The organizer approached Amelia and presented her with a small certificate, thanking her for her courage and her contribution to the community. "We are lucky to have you, Amelia," the organizer said with a smile. "Thank you for reminding us of what it means to look out for one another." Amelia grinned as she accepted the certificate, her heart full. After the meeting ended, Amelia's parents knelt beside her. "You were amazing, sweetie," Rachel whispered, hugging her daughter tightly. Tom smiled and ruffled Amelia's hair. "We are so proud of you," he said. "You've taught us something really important tonight." Amelia beamed, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. "I had help," she said, glancing over at Ms. Hilda. Rachel and Tom exchanged a glance, knowing just how much Ms. Hilda had done for their daughter. They walked over to the elderly woman, their expressions filled with gratitude. "Ms. Hilda," Rachel began, "we can't thank you enough. What you did, it changed everything for us." Ms. Hilda smiled warmly. "It was my pleasure," she said. "And honestly, Amelia helped me just as much as I helped her." Rachel tilted her head. How so? Ms. Hilda's eyes softened. I spent a lot of years thinking I didn't have much to offer anymore. But meeting Amelia reminded me that there's always a way to make a difference, no matter how small. Tom extended his hand, and Ms. Hilda shook it firmly. You've become family to us, he said sincerely, and we'd love for you to be part of Amelia's life going forward, if you'd like that. Tears welled up in Ms. Hilda's eyes, but she blinked them away with a smile. I'd love that, she whispered. Amelia threw her arms around Ms. Hilda, hugging her tightly. You're the best, Ms. Hilda, she whispered. And you, my dear, Ms. Hilda said, hugging her back, are my little hero. As autumn gave way to winter, the bond between Amelia and Ms. Hilda only deepened. They continued their walks through the park, spent afternoons at the community center, and read books under the warm light of the library windows. Amelia's parents also became more involved in the community, volunteering at events and attending neighborhood watch meetings. Their time together as a family felt more connected and meaningful than ever before. Ms. Hilda began to feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a renewed sense of purpose. The days of sitting alone, feeling disconnected from the world, were gone. Now, her life felt full with Amelia's energy, with meaningful conversations, and with the joy of being part of something bigger than herself. One snowy afternoon, Amelia and Ms. Hilda sat on their favorite park bench, bundled up in scarves and mittens. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, coating the branches of trees and making the park look like a scene from a storybook. Amelia leaned closer to Ms. Hilda. I have an idea, she whispered conspiratorially. Ms. Hilda raised a curious eyebrow. Oh? What sort of idea? A surprise, Amelia said with a grin. For you. Ms. Hilda laughed warmly. A surprise for me? What could that be? Amelia giggled. You'll find out soon. Later that week, Ms. Hilda was invited to a holiday event at the community center, hosted by the neighborhood families. She arrived to find the hall decorated with twinkling lights and festive decorations. Laughter and music filled the room, and children ran around excitedly. To her surprise, a special announcement was made. Amelia stepped onto the small stage, holding a wrapped box with a bright red ribbon. This is for you, Ms. Hilda, Amelia said, her eyes sparkling with joy. Ms. Hilda opened the gift carefully, revealing a beautifully framed photo of her and Amelia sitting on their park bench. Beneath the photo were the words, "Thank you for being my hero." Tears welled up in Ms. Hilda's eyes. She hugged Amelia tightly, overwhelmed by the love and kindness she had found in this little girl. You're my hero too, Amelia, Ms. Hilda whispered. In the following months, the trial of Isaac Fletcher took place. Detective Myers kept Amelia's family informed throughout the process. While Amelia's testimony was not required, the evidence against Fletcher was overwhelming. It was revealed that he had been involved in numerous attempts to abduct children. But thanks to Amelia's quick thinking and Ms. Hilda's intervention, he was stopped before he could cause further harm. The verdict brought a sense of closure, not just for Amelia and her family, but for the entire community. Fletcher was sentenced to prison, ensuring he would never again pose a threat. The neighborhood celebrated, not just for the justice served, but for the strength they had found in each other. With the trial behind them and the seasons changing once again, Ms. Hilda found herself embracing a new role in the community. She officially became a volunteer mentor at the community center, teaching children how to read, write, and share their stories. She also became an honorary member of Amelia's family, attending dinners, birthdays, and holidays with them. For the first time in years, Ms. Hilda felt truly connected to the world around her, and she knew that she had Amelia to thank for bringing that light back into her life. On a warm spring afternoon, exactly a year after their first encounter, Amelia and Ms. Hilda sat on their favorite bench in the park. The trees were in bloom, and children's laughter echoed through the playground. It was a peaceful moment, filled with the quiet joy of simply being together. Amelia rested her head on Ms. Hilda's shoulder. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that day? She asked softly. Miss Hilda wrapped an arm around the girl. I try not to think about what could have been, she said gently. What matters is what did happen, and we found each other. Amelia smiled. You were really brave, Miss Hilda. And so were you, darling, Miss Hilda replied. We were brave together. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. The park, once a place of fear, had become a place of joy and friendship, a symbol of new beginnings. In the years that followed, Amelia and Miss Hilda's friendship remained a constant source of joy. Miss Hilda became a beloved figure in the neighborhood, her wisdom and kindness touching the lives of many. Amelia grew into a confident young woman, her bravery and kindness continuing to inspire those around her. At the heart of their story was a simple truth. Sometimes, the people we meet by chance become the most important part of our lives. And sometimes, being brave doesn't mean facing danger alone. It means asking for help when you need it most. For Ms. Hilda and Amelia, their chance meeting had been more than just a fleeting moment in the park. It had been the beginning of a friendship that would last a lifetime, a friendship built on trust, courage, and the simple magic of being there for one another. And as they sat on that park bench, sharing a quiet moment under the spring sky, they knew that no matter what life brought their way, they would always face it together,